welcome to this afternoon, this conference session inside the Geography and Heritage, a Congress of the Geographical Study Society of Italy. Physically, we are in Vercelli. Vercelli is the European capital of rice, and is the right place for the meeting of today. Today we discuss about material and immaterial agroecological heritage between relational ontologies, guardianes de semilla, and agroforestry texture. This event is an overlapping of many activities. We are inside a conference on the issue of heritage and geography, and we are also in the third seminar, the cycle based Changemaker, related to the understanding what are the possibility of work and action of experts in the issue of climate adaptation and territorial development, working in different issues, research, territorial transition, activities related to support to organization, etc. The topic of today has to do with the importance of material and immaterial heritage in relation with agroecology. As you know, there is an international convention of UNESCO related to the immaterial heritage, and inside this convention there are some interesting immaterial goods protected, like a traditional method of cultivation, seasonality of alpine pasture, palm cultivation, beekeeping forest, preparation of ceviche in Peru, or other example or typical Mediterranean cuisine, and etc. These are examples of protection of experience related to agroecosystem, to knowledge, traditional knowledge, practice, and cosmovisions. There are also material landscape, like a landscape of Italy, Sweden, Ethiopia, pastoral landscape, or forest landscape. And these are the result of traditional agriculture. Agroecology is a sort of meeting point between different experience, between science, movement, and practice. It is related to the democratization of knowledge, the protection of food sovereignty, the biocultural diversity, in terms of weaving practice of circulation, knowledge, construction, related to material, immaterial heritage of territories. And in emancipatory perspectives, these reflections are related with territorial food policies, transforming structure, and collecting local experience as a tool to face the challenge of climate adaptation. Today we have 6 contributions. 4 contributions are from activities related to the thesis in the last year of the Erasmus of the program on climate change, diversity, sustainable territorial development. One is a research in a PhD thesis, and another is a research inside a research group at the University of Padua. We have the possibility today to see some concrete practice of research dealing with change in agricultural context in the framework of agroecology. The first contribution is about the agroecological transition of farms in Ecuadorian Andes through the lens of main agroecological structure. We have with us Gabriel Sainz from the Fundación Rural Ecuador, and a program of FAO related to forest and farm facilities. I let the floor to Gabriel. Thanks to be here. As you know, you have 15 minutes for your presentation.
Good morning to you all. Hopefully you will hear me well. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Well, thank you for being here. My research project is about the analysis of the main agroecological structure in the northern central Ecuadorian Andes. So first, we're going to talk about the introduction and objectives of the research, the methods, the results, and the main discussion, and then the conclusions and the next steps. So first, why agroecology? In Latin America, agroindustry has shaped the way of development in many senses, political, social, and of course, economical as well. The intensification of land use and land cover changes due to agroindustry has led to many severe problems in Latin America in general, as the privatization of biological and natural resources such as water, land, and also seeds, and also changes in politics, in national politics, due to lobbying for free trade agreement and the imposition of indebtment mechanisms with peasants, ending up in land accumulation by dispossession. So, to face all these problems and dimensions of complexity, it emerges agroecology as one of the most prominent alternatives to address these social, economic, and environmental asymmetries. It is a science, but also a practice and a social movement, which provides a balanced environment and sustained yields through the design of diverse agroecosystems, incorporating many practices that have been passed down through generations as traditional ecological knowledges as well, and that promotes the development of efficient practices in a dialogue between actors, fighting with asymmetries of power in general. However, the transition to agroecology and the transition of a complex system like a farm itself is a process that depends on many factors such as biological.
Mi scuso l'interruzione sul canale italiano, c'è il riverbero tra le due traduttrici, grazie.
We don't listen the English contribution.
Attenzione, scusate.
May I continue?
Yes, you can speak.
Okay, thank you. So, as we were saying, the transition of complex systems depends on many factors, like we said, biological, social, economical, and political as well. And these factors will also determine the resilience of the transition on and of the farm itself, which means that under a disturbance, which might be environmental, but might be also economical, might be social, the farm will endure its transition with a sustained yield. In Ecuador, more than 64% of national agricultural production comes from small-scale producers, which comes directly to the tables of Ecuadorian people, especially in the Andean region. Sorry. So the scaling up of agroecological practices face as well severe changes. For example, lack of government support, weak regulation, political regulation, scarce cooperation programs, limited access to commercial spaces, and so on. But one of the most severe challenges is the poor understanding of the main factors that condition an effective transition. In this sense, we have proposed to characterize the main agroecological structure of agroecological farms in the north and central Ecuadorian Andean region. For this, we identify the type and development of agroecological practices employed in the farm management under this MAS framework. We determine the main factors behind the variation of this mass between the study sites, and we analyze the landscape features surrounding the farms for the selected studies and its change through time. So how we do this? First of all, we conducted this study in 4 provinces in the central, northern, and then region of Ecuador, which encompasses Imbabura, Pichincha, Cotopaxi, and Chimborazo as well. We selected 20 farms distributed along these 4 provinces, which are under an agroecological management of their farms in the census of Altieri and Nichols 2000. The main agroecological structure is a methodology that quantifies 5 ecological and 5 cultural indicators as well. The first 5 ecological indicators quantify the amount of vegetation, local vegetation surrounding the farm, as well as the support that farmers give to the assistance vegetation, like, for example, living fences all around the farms, within and in the borders of it. And then the cultural indicators mostly check for the practices that farmers conduct in the farms and how do they support the improvement of agrobiodiversity and the conservation of their of life in general, in soil and above it. So we did a 3-step approach, which consisted of interviews with farmers for evaluated indicators 7 to 10, which are the cultural ones, then walks around the farm along with the farm manager or main farmer for evaluating indicators 2 to 6, and finally the measurement with satellite images for evaluating indicator number 1. And this was systematically repeated throughout the 20 farms. So here you can see a reference image of how it is, like the satellite processment of the images of the farms. This was conducted during Google Earth, which is an open, really easy to use interface. And in the left, we have the picture of one of the farmers that contributed to this research. So we analyzed 20 farms, and most of the farms were owned by the farm owner, which means that they are not rented, because it's a really common practice here in the Andean region in Ecuador. And most of the crops were included, but not limited to, maize and then tubers, short cycle vegetables, seasonal fruits, and also many legumes as well. We saw briefly that there are 2 main tendencies, and it's the reduction of the plot size, which means that sizes for the plots for using for farming are smaller every time, and that most of the producers were ladies over 50 years old. So we have a feminization and aging in the fields, which is along with many other research results, but this was not the main focus of the research. However, we found it important to report the results that we found in this sense. In case of the mass measurements, then we measured 20 of the farms. Let's remember that these farms were supposed to be agroecological, right? However, they obtained really different results. And for example, we found 5 farms that had a really robust and main agroecological structure. We're gonna explain in detail what does this means. And the rest of them was considerably to moderately developed of the main agroecological structure. First of all, we wanted to see if it's related to size. As we saw, we have experienced a reduction in the plot size, so we propose that perhaps this has to do with the variation of mass. However, in the correlation analysis, we couldn't find conclusive results about the correlation between the size of the farm and the mass score. So apparently there is no relationship. However, it might be due to the reduced population that we used, which are 20 farms. Perhaps conducting this research with more farms will enable us to check if any further what's the relationship in a more clear sense. So now we wanted to check as well what is the main variation factor behind the mass. And we found that perhaps it's due to its site. We found that, for example, the sites that we employed are 5. CY means Cayambe, from left to right. CA means Cacha, which is a location in Chimborazo. CO means Cotopaxi, which are many locations in the whole province. ME means La Merced, which is a rural province here in Pichincha. And finally, ES means La Esperanza, a rural province also in Imbabura, in the northern part of the Andean region. And we found that both Cayambe and La Merced had the most developed results, implying that, for example, in Cayambe and in La Merced, there is something that has improved over the time the main agroecological structure of the sites. We propose that this might be due to a potential that these two locations have, because what's mostly different in these locations in comparison to the others is that they have received a longer time of cooperation programs and aid in general, both from the state and from private organizations, in comparison to the other ones whose cooperation background is far lower. So we propose that perhaps finding a way to conduct the cooperation efforts both from private and public organizations might improve in general the capacities and knowledges of farmers to maintain and to improve the main agroecological structure over time. This was the case, for example, of the farm number 4. Here we can see its owners. It was the smallest farm in the whole sample. It has 500 square meters in general. And however, it gives a really impressive amount of yields. It has a really impressive amount of diversity, both in living fences and in the agricultural products in themselves. And they reported a really long agroecological work of more than 30 years. In the ones, the cooperation of private and public organizations has been essential for farm owners to develop many techniques and designs in the proper farm to achieve these results and to get the knowledge to understand how agrobiodiversity supports the yields that they might have, and of course, to avoid the usage of agrochemicals and pesticides and improve an agroecological design in general. So this is one of the main... Thank you, Massimo. This is one of the main hints about how the cooperation potential goes beyond even the capacity of influencing the surrounding landscape, which might be proven by the indicator number 1, which is the one that measures the amount of patches of forests around the farm. Finally, we measured as well if there was any change. For this, we use satellite images provided by the Ministry of Agriculture, and we compared it with the oldest image available from Google Earth photos, and we didn't find any significant differences. However, we rescue the potential that this has for utilizing satellite images from different historical periods to prove in a brief and general manner how land distribution is changing in these zones of interests. So finally, with the application of mass, we learned 3 main things. The mass is a dimension of change out of many. It's a really easy to apply methodology with relatively low resources that might shed light on a macro dimension of change. Second, it has a great potential for evaluating land use and land cover changes over time, as mapping techniques are fast and precise, and they are also easy to access and easy to use in general. And the third main finding is that capacity building processes have been a key aspect of the mass variation and further all of the agroecological transition. The mass appears to be strongly influenced by the capacity building processes that result in the improvement of agricultural management techniques. This could even buffer a poor connectivity with the landscape, which is one of the main features that the mass measures. The next steps of this research is to socialize this methodology in detail, as well as the results, with the participants of the research in general, which are the farmers, main farmers, and to publish the results, which is already in an advanced step, to share it with the academic community. Thank you.
Thank you, Gabriel, to stay perfectly on time. We let the question at the end of all the presentation. Many thanks. Now I let the floor to Daniele Codato. He is professor at the University of Padova, dealing with GIS and the issue of landscape. He present something related to agroecological experience. Please, Daniele, the floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you, Massimo. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon or good morning if you are in Ecuador in South America. My presentation, the title of my presentation is Urban Agroecological Initiatives and Municipal Heritage, the case of community urban gardens in the municipality of Padua. One moment, okay. And nowadays, around 55% of population is living in cities. So this is a phenomenon started mainly since the second half of the past century, and the urbanization rate is also growing, as you can see here. And this means also an expansion of urban areas, in many cases in a sustainable way. And this is affecting also the well-being of citizens living in cities. In particular, this is due to a soil sealing, so the impermeabilization of soil in the cities that with the help of the contribution of climate change is causing a lot of different negative impacts on the environment, on the citizens. In particular, for example, we can have urban heat island, urban biodiversity loss, urban ecosystem service degradation, and so on. This is also a phenomena that is impacting on the city, in the city of Padua. Padua is a city located in Italy, in the north of Italy, in particular here in the Veneto region, in Pianura Padana floodplain. Padua is well known also by STeDe student because they spent some months in Padua. Now, for example, we have having a lot of problem of urban heat island and flooding in Padua with recent precipitations. Padua is a typical middle-sized city, so we have about 92 square kilometers of municipality, and it has a territory that is heterogeneous and fragmented, and we have the area of Padua, the soil, almost the 50% of the soil of Padua is sealed. Okay, so Padua is the 5th Italian city for soil sealing. And this is causing this problem of urban heat island, of pollution, of flooding problems that we had in this last month for the huge precipitations that we received. The municipality of Padua is trying to cope with these problems. For example, they try to create and to adopt a municipality green plan, but it is not mandatory. Okay, and also the municipalities as also is responsible also of a good amount of green areas, about 5 square kilometers. Okay, that could be used as a sort of municipal green heritage for habitants that can help to improve the efforts of the municipality together with the citizen to cope with this problem. In this study that I'm presenting, we focus mainly on the municipal community gardens, okay, because urban agriculture is recognized also by literature as an important sector that can help to improve urban ecosystem services and food security in cities. For example, mainly in urban and peri-urban area, mainly if it is managed with organic way and an agroecological way. The research objectives of Padua has since 90 present different sites of community gardens, and with this and it is the community gardens are something of big interest by a lot of Paduan citizens. So the research that we tried, we investigate, the main aims was were to develop and test a participatory process to define and rank a set of decision criteria that could be useful to identify municipal green areas potentially suitable for hosting other agricultural and other community gardens, and investigate also the main reasons that drive assignees of this community garden to cultivate a plot. So the idea is to increase, to foster this good urban agriculture practice, investigating in the urban and green heritage of Padua, where we can locate, we can put other community garden. We followed a qualitative approach. So we conduct different structured interviews with assignees of the current urban gardens and with municipal decision makers. And then we, mainly in GIS environment, we try to analyze and we perform spatial and multi-criteria analysis. Multi-criteria is a methodology, is a set of methodologies that help, that could improve decision-making processes, because they help these methodologies can help the ranking of alternatives on the basis of different criteria weighted by that could be weighted by decision makers. This is mainly the workflow. So we acquire and process different spatial data and statistical data at the Padua municipality level. We define a set of decision-making criteria with mainly with discussion, interview with municipal stakeholder, and then we conduct structured interviews with assignees to try to understand their opinion and to try to understand which are the most important criteria for a location of new community gardens. And then we try also to evaluate the available area. Okay, and this is the structured interview were conducted in 7 areas. These are all the community gardens nuclei. We have 19 nuclei around, as you can see, around Padua. This is Padua municipality. These are the borders of Padua, and these in red are all the urban units that are sort of sub-municipal units very useful for statistic and other purposes. Okay, and these are the 7 community gardens where we carried out interviews. They are well distributed all around the Padua municipality, and we reach finally we conducted these interviews in July 2023, and we reached 56 respondents. And here we can see some answers, the analysis of some of the answers that we carried out with these assignees. For example, we try to understand their knowledge about different type of community gardens in Padua, and of course they know the community garden, the typical community garden of Padua, that is usually the traditional and social, that are the community gardens that are distributed within families or people with an age of 60 years old or more. But and with which of these types should be promoted and increased in Padua, as we can see, they said that the didactic community gardens should be improved in Padua. This is also interesting, an interesting result, because it is quite linked to this other graph here, where we can see that which did you choose to cultivate a community garden is in Padua, or at least with this interviewed, is not a sort of food security. They choose to cultivate a community garden more for stay in nature, or cultivate the land, or cultivate a relationship. So they are more related to cultural ecosystem services and to obtain healthy food. But the be autonomous in food production and economic advantages have a very low rate of response. They also usually manage, there are some people, mainly elder people, that manage the plot alone, but a lot also manage the plot with the help of friends, family, and so on. And also here we have these are some different questions that they answered. As we can see, we of course answer also if they think that the community gardens are sufficient in Padua, and as you can see, they most part of respondents say that they are not sufficient.
The last 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. So I go on. These are the criteria that we used for the multi-criteria simulations. As you can see, we divide the simulation in two. We try to create a distance index and a social index. And distance index, for example, we used the presence of a residential building, with the idea that more closer is the community garden to residential buildings, to the assinees, better is, and this reached the first place as weight, okay, as a rank. Or, for example, the closeness to cycle paths, to pedestrian street, and so on. As social index, we try also to think about social justice or environmental justice. So we try, for example, we try to prefer areas with less presence of private green areas, or areas of Padua with more presence of migrants. So with the simulation, we obtain two kind of maps: a map about a sort of social index and distance index, and we put together these two index to obtain our overall index, where we can see that as social index we have the neighborhood, the urban units in the north, in this part of Padua, that scored the best rank, because here there are a lot of migrants. There are few private green areas. Yes, there are a few private green areas, so on. And in the distance index, for example, we have more. We have an index higher here in the center, where there are more cycle paths, there are less community gardens, and so on. And this is the same simulation, but for the green areas, the municipality green areas. And here we can see some example. And here we also try to evaluate the available surface area. So we try to recognize, because here we have only the green areas, we try to extract the real green area, the real surface that can be used for the implementation of new community gardens. So as you can see here, we try to score, to understand, to analyze what is the percentage of the different areas that score. For example, we have here the 10 best green areas, the real surface that can be useful for the implementation of new community gardens. And some final considerations. So we try to develop a participatory process for the creation of suitability scenarios and a sharing of these decision-making criteria, so to include also the opinion of people in this process. And we apply this multi-criteria analysis as a sort of example of support system for the municipality to understand where to put new community garden. Grazie per l'attenzione.
Thanks, Daniele, for your contribution, especially to focusing on the issue of the city. Now we let the floor to Elisabeth Masneri. She is preparing the master thesis. She will share with us some consideration on exploring socio-ecological relationship in agroforestry. Please, Elisabeth, the floor is yours. You have 15 minutes. Thanks.
Thank you, Massimo. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Elisabeth, student of STeDe Master, and today I will try to connect heritage studies and agroforestry transition using some case studies from my research in Colombia. Because all thinking involves framing, I thought that some theoretical framework would help us understand the complexities of the topic of this call, that is about material and immaterial agroecological heritage. And this exploration will be structured around some theoretical framework and then the case studies. And the classical definition, I would depart from this, of biocultural heritage is the ecological and cultural legacy of millennia-old land use practice on present-day biological diversity. But I think that instead of definition, it is easier to understand it with an example. So the Amazon rainforest, it is the classical example, and it's the result of management practice by its indigenous inhabitants over thousands of years. And the complex interaction between human action and the ecosystem have shaped these traditional agroforestry systems. The newest conceptualization of landscape and agroforestry as heritage, suggested by Ferrara, Ekblom, and Wasfeld, considers biocultural heritage as fundamentally about co-constitution. So humans are participating in ecologies in a series of becomings with other beings, like non-human beings. And in essence, I think that biocultural heritage emerges as a complex interaction between humans and non-human processes, and intentionally creates ecological diversity that we see today, for example, in tropical forests. And so following this framework, Ferrara, Ekblom, and Wasfeld apply it to an agroforestry landscape in Sicily. And they suggest that one key action is to take into consideration that we are constantly creating and reshaping the future nature and landscapes. And with this statement, they kind of frame the action of people, of local communities, as combining preservation and landscape management. And they study in Sicily, they say that there are two possible futures scenarios. So the first one is that the rural inner areas continue to depopulate, leading to the degradation of biocultural heritage and the marginalization of the remaining community and their knowledge. And the second one is that people remain or begin returning to the inner areas and take over small-scale agricultural activities. And here, in this second scenario, is where I think we can draw the line between biocultural heritage and emancipatory agroecology. Like these two future options, I think that are already present in our geographies, forming multi-level maps of resistance, loss, and generation. But I argue that the centers of resistance of biocultural heritage share common factors, and the common factor for me is that they practice agroecology. And I cannot say that Sicily and the Antioquia region in Colombia have the same socio-ecological dynamics. That is not the point at all. However, I have noticed that there are some similarities, like the issue of peasants' migration to the cities exists both in Cozzo del Lampo and in Carmen del Viboral. and the subdivision of land for building houses for people from the global north, city dwellers, and gentrification exist in both places. And on the map, this is a map of a rural area of Carmen del Viboral, a municipality in the region of Antioquia, Colombia, where I've been for my thesis. We can see in red the lands that in the last 15 years have been converted to floriculture for exportation, mostly under greenhouses and with high use of pesticides. And in purple, we can see the agricultural lands being subdivided for urban construction due to the farmers' migration to the city. And this kind of extractive and capitalist dynamics are leading to the loss of biocultural memory, causing the biocultural heritage of the landscape also to be lost, and because the situated community and the knowledge are basically disappearing. But in yellow, we can see a family of campesinos that remained and regenerated their land, preserving biocultural heritage and co-created what we said before, new natures through agroecology. And I argue that agroecology is essential for preserving biocultural heritage because it brings back traditional ways of thinking and living while also incorporating modern knowledge. And I don't have time to go into super details, but I will share some brief stories about two examples from the Antioquia region that are special to me. And the first one is Tierra Yay. It's a 1.1 hectare agroforestry in the Santuario municipality in Antioquia that began its transition in 2014 from completely abandoned and degraded land, basically clay, lacking soil, due to agrotoxin and intensive conventional agriculture. And they practice complex successional biodiverse agroforestry to attract as much animal biodiversity as possible. Through pruning and nutrient cycling, their goal is to transform this degraded soil into living soil, bringing back these natural cycles. And this is, I think, essentially the opposite of what industrial system is doing, that is trying to simplify and standardize landscape. And here's a brief anecdote from the agroforestry linked to biocultural heritage and the co-creation of landscape that we framed before. So in March, within this agroforestry system, we performed like a drastic pruning of biomass trees and the fruit trees, positioning all the pruned material, as you can see in the photo, on the soil. And this creates lignin, that is an excellent food source for fungi and soil biodiversity. And such drastic prunings are called the pulsos, meaning giving an impulse to the growth of the agroforestry by pruning and adding new organic material to the soil. And that March, we had forgotten some branches, to prune some branches of an avocado tree. And we didn't know if to prune them or not. And at the end, with the lack of time, we decided to leave them. And the next day, I woke up to thousands of ants, as you can see in the video, that were eating some leaves. And so I went to the Natalias, the two farmers, and I said to them, "There are ants, what should I do?" And they replied to me, "Déjalas." Like, let them. The system is replying to the pulsos, and the ants are pruning what we left behind yesterday. So in that moment, I kind of understood this co-creation that we see in theory books, and that like in a complex and healthy agroforestry system, human actions such as pruning are completed by non-human activities like ants participating in processes. And this interaction creates a dynamic system with feedback loops and complex socio-ecological relationship, and integrating many processes, and not just agriculture, but in agriculture there is carbon cycling, decomposition, symbiotic relationship, fungi, and animals. And then we arrived to the second case studies that I wanted to show to you today. La Buenaventura It's a 2.1 hectares finca, completely regenerated from a grazing land located in Vereda Camargo in the Carmen del Viboral municipality. And it's the 20 years old process of a campesinos family trying to link agroecological agroforestry transition to their campesinos identity, connecting agroecology to also the biocultural heritage of Andean landscape. And some conversation that I had with the family had me thinking about the link between this biocultural heritage and the construction of new landscapes. And one day, Don I, lo vamos a llamar Don I, told me, I told my dad, you had sod and abundant soils. We have it in reverse. Look where we are now, we are in clay. You cut down the forest to plant potatoes, but we need to create forest and hope that one day we will be able to create a small patch for potatoes. They gave us a different challenge. And another time, he said to me, for me, living in the countryside means freedom, being more autonomous. It has allowed me to interact more with others in a more cooperative and supportive way. This comes from the elders who used to hold the mingas to plant. And then he said, competition, here the birds and everyone eats. What sort of the pest and weeds, there's enough for everyone. So in our conversation, I saw a deep awareness here of the past, the present, and the future. Like, of course, recognizing that we need to change land management practice, but without ignoring the Andean biocultural heritage and their campesinos identity. And agroecology, which empowers campesinos through autonomy, like he said, living in the countryside means freedom for me and autonomy, is linked to the biocultural memory also of other types of work, for example, the cooperation, the memory of cooperation seen in collective work, las mingas, like the elders, the abuelos always did. And also the cooperation gives food not just to the human counterpart, but also to the non-human counterpart of the ecosystem. Like he said, pa todos hay. And so just to conclude with this theory and anecdotes, I have a final quote by Rosset and Val that says that agroecology doesn't provide recipes. It offers examples, inspiration, and principles so that everyone can build their own. This idea reminds me a lot one of Haraway's epistemic proposal. Like she said, instead of opposing universalism with relativism, we should emphasize these situated knowledges and continue to narrate these situated knowledges. And I hope, like, as we are doing here, like future researchers continue to give space to these situated knowledges, supporting diverse emancipatory practice that transcend this universalism, of division between nature and culture, and finally give space to these socio-ecological and multi-species complex relationships. Yeah, thank you for your attention. I think this is the bibliography and contacts if someone wants to know more.
Thanks, Elizabeth, for your contribution and for this reflection between some experience of agroecological farming and some theoretical reflection around these topics. Now we move to another contribution. Eduardo Crescini is doing the PhD on the issue of palm oil in Ecuador, focusing on the concept of plantación ocene. I let the floor to Eduardo.
Yeah, thank you, Massimo. We'll share the screen. Okay. You can see?
Yes, the level is very low. If you can speak a little louder.
Okay, yeah, okay, okay, perfect. Good afternoon to everybody. I am Eduardo Crescini, and I'll present my PhD research on limits of voluntary certification standard of the oil palm industry in Ecuador. I want to start with some reflection related to the meaning of plantazionocene. It's clear from the last IPCC report, but all the scientific evidence that human society and its activities have unequivocally induced the current climate crisis and have changed the Earth's surface and natural ecosystem. The intensive conventional agriculture, as the one you can see from the photos, in this case, the intensive palm oil cultivation is one of the cause of the influence of human activities and its footprint on the natural ecosystem. This is why Don Harvey and Anat Singh introduced this new neologism, which is plantazionocene, with which they want to focus on the intensive agricultural model as an extractive, exploited, and closed way to simplify the territories, natural ecosystem, and practices and actors through cases of slavery in the case of work, but also lack of human rights and many impacts in the sense of social and environmental one. And so this new configuration favoring the proliferation of some and the removals of others, changing also the landscape of tropical areas from forest to this of many researchers define the green desert, with the use of high technology instruments and also chemicals, which are the main instrument to this, how Don Harvey said, epidemic-friendly way of rearranging species life in the world. So palm oil, or in general African palm, is a living capital, and now there is some definition like flex crops or cash crops, which are crops mainly for the economic purpose or that have a different commercial purpose. And for sure the African palm is not what we can define a staple crop, so the crops who dominates the major part of our diet. And this is important things, because in the plantazionocene, the agriculture of concentration of flex or cash crops will produce will produce problems of food sovereignty or food security in region where there is the expansion of oil palm, because the reduction of local availability of subsistence food crops, or higher price of staple crops because there are only the cultivation of palm oil. And in the framework of climate change, this type of cultivation play an important role. As we can see, the affluent sector, which represent the manage of our land, the manage of forest and other land use, is the third sector for annual carbon dioxide equivalent emission after electricity and industry. And in the case of vegetable oils, now we are exceeding the production of more than 200 million tons each year, of which 40% are represented by palm oil, which are now occupy 21 million hectares of land worldwide, and over 70 million tons of oil produced every year, as we can see in the graph. This is because the growth of palm oil is not present high prices. There is also, as we can see, as we said before, flex crops, and also have high yields in terms of amount of oil produced per unit, respect of the soybean, sunflowers, and other. The only other aspect of which I want to focus is that this emission calculated by the IPCC respect of the total amount of annual carbon dioxide equivalent emission it's only a part of agriculture chain, because if we consider also the transport, the industry to the production of product and all the food chain, this sector arrive at 42% of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions. So it's very important start thinking to go beyond this conventional intensive agriculture, also because there are other impacts of palm oil production. The first one, of course, is the direct deforestation of forests for its expansion, and at the same time the enclosed and simplification of natural ecosystems as tropical rainforests to a green desert will cause a great impact on biodiversity. In fact, 99% of tree species are lost compared to a natural ecosystem, but also as we can see in the graph, there are all mammal diversity. We are losing till 90% of species. Some of mammals are part of UCN red list of threatened species, as the Sumatran orangutan or tiger, and we have also decline in avifauna and Lepidoptera respectively, with also great impacts on landscape. Then, for focusing on the social impact, there is also the territorial power relationship, which change because companies, thanks to concession given by the national government, are implemented the practices of violence as land grabbing and exploitation of community, strong surveillance, and use of violence. In fact, in the case of palm production, but in general, the conventional intensive agriculture are one of the most violent places in the world. And then we have the governance, the landscape governance of palm oil, which is a complex governance landscape due to the production of which are talking in this scenario where we see the public and private presented in different in different ways and different instruments, which sometimes are overlapping between each other, as in the case of biofuel regulation, that in the case of European Union are regulation of communities, and so it's mandatory. But we have also the ICC, which is a sustainable biofuel certification scheme, which is voluntary. So also the different certification labor around the production of palm oil contributes to focusing among to make confusion among producer, manufacturers, and consumers. The most famous one is the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil, because it's widely used for the certification worldwide. It's contribute about the 20% of global oil palm production. And the funny thing is that promoting by European Union and other global north actors as Unilever or WWF. And the main aim of this certification is to prosecute with a business-to-business model, so intensify capitalist production and profit, and reinforcing the inequalities and socio-environmental impacts, but with a green and sustainable background. The palm oil sector in Ecuador represents 5% of gross domestic product, and the production is variegated through the year. Now we have like 500,000 tons of oil produced, with around 28,000 hectares of palm oil cultivation now in Ecuador, which is the 5th production country in Mesoamerica and 11th worldwide. This is the situation of the main province where the oil palm have been produced, where there is the oil palm production. The south with the province of Los Rios and Guayas, the northwest where there is the province of Esmeralda, where the most conflict related to palm oil production are presented, and then the new frontiers of oil palm expansion, which is represented by the Ecuadorian Amazon region, in particular in the province of Orellana and Sucumbíos. In 2014, the institutionalization of RSPO standards in Ecuador, which causes a series of problems. The first one is the reconfiguration of power dynamics. In fact, there was something like is the governance beyond the state, because now there is like a switch from a classic national palm governance to a new jurisdictional approach, where the companies and the association are present to manage this type of sector, and so the social environmental impact and conflict caused by companies are mere technical issues, are not political one. And then also the pressure through different type of action used by company bring the communal lands to be saved by smallholders through high presence of violence, and in the end, the use of certification labels, changing the narrative of palm oil production through a new false win-win action by both companies and communities. So they try to give a new imagination of this neoliberal process as fair and just, even if there is like a mere controls of resource as a new form of governance structure that persists in the same extractivist logic as before. There are different limitations of this certification. The first one, as I already said, is that is mainly driven by Global North to usurping the role of Global South in promoting their own production. These eco-labels are not mandatory, so they are not really take action about the sustainable manage of the territories. And the other things is that for smallholders or campesinos, it's difficult to afford the cost of the transition to certification. So they are really marginalized in that sense. And this is also a way to bring the market in the hands of few and large growers. So the narrative of oil palm sector in Ecuador, who try to see as a sort of green alternative to oil sector, and so the use of certification to try to give a sustainable way.
Guardo, the last 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you, Massimo. I say create a path of national development and poverty alleviation. It's only a lie, because as we can see, the peasant economy provides more jobs than the one of agriculture intensive, conventional intensive, and also these cause migration and dispossession of livelihoods, and the workers are also face off very important impact due to the minimal investment in protection against the use agrotoxins or the tons of on the tons of palm fruit. Working hours are more than 12, and it's a very low wages, which are often dependent on the international price of the palm. The second thing is that there is third actors who have the task to employment and payment of workers. So the companies avoided the direct responsibility to get job from the to the community, but they can penalize social leaders who criticize or organize to prevent company abuse. And at least it's very important that the laws of forest, it's not only the destruction of natural ecosystem in the terms of biodiversity, but also in terms of cultural heritage, because the indigenous communities use forest in the sense of building houses, canoes, utensils, different instruments, but also for traditional managing and hunting or fruit gathering. To conclude, the new imagination to go beyond the plantation chain could be the one presented in the article published in Nature, which is use trees island of different sites within oil palm plantation to restore the biodiversity and ecosystem services. So reforesting the green desert, but not replace the protection of remaining forest. And it's very important because in the large plantation, the production is not all impacted by the substitution with these trees island. And so there is benefit instead of ecosystem restoration that is very tangible, as we can see in the graph. These changes, however, it's could considered also by smallholders who can compensate the decrease in the yield with other goods give by the trees island, so fruits, timbers, or firewood. And I think that this is a great alternative to starting to go beyond the conventional agricultural systems. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks, Eduardo, to shape this imagination of island of diversity. Now let's the floor to Nicola Mozzato. He is doing the master thesis in Ecuador, working with the Condesan. He will share with us some experience of agroecological production systems in Cotacachi. Please, Nicola, the floor is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share. Okay, can you see?
Yes, perfect. You can start. You can put in the presentation
Thank
way.
you. So,
Thanks.
can't you see the presentation? Yeah.
Yes, we see.
So this presentation is about an ongoing thesis research in 20 Andean chakras in Cotacachi in the rural area of Imbabura province in the northern Andes of Ecuador. The research is about the perception of and the effects of climate change in these 20 agroecological productive systems, and the evaluation of resilience and vulnerability to climate change of the analyzed system. So the Andean chakra is an ancestral agricultural system of pre-Columbian origin of the Quichuas, indigenous people in Ecuadorian Andean region. In this agricultural system is characterized by small areas with high agrobiodiversity due to the vertical landscape that enables the growth of different species adapted to different height and climate floors. So indigenous people, indigenous communities have lived in this area for thousands of years and have used agriculture agricultural practices adapted to the climate and topography. And this chakra system is characterized by its cultural importance too, because it enables the connection between the indigenous communities and the Pachamama, that is the Mother Earth. Thus, according to the Andean cosmovision, sustainable landscape management enables the harmony among each part of the Pachamama. So the harmony between the landscape and human too. And different climate floors can be found on the Interandean zone from 2,500 to 3,400 meters above sea level. And the territory is, in general, an optimal area for conservation of native crops such as corn, bean, potato, quinoa, and amaranth. In Cotacachi, in the agroecological gardens in Cotacachi can be found up to 227 species and varieties, considering only plants that have a human purpose use, such as tubers, roots, fruits, cereals, and medicinal plants. The 20 chakras considered for this study are an example of conservation of agrobiodiversity, as up to 109 species and varieties can be found in a small area, in small areas up to 3 hectares. The main objective of the research is the evaluation of the vulnerability and the resilience of the chakras to external stress and to climate change through the application of part of the tool for agroecological performance evaluation developed by Food and Agriculture Organization. And the other objectives of the research are getting to know the main crops, the agricultural strategies, and the agroecological practices in the analyzed chakras, and the understanding of the perception of climate change through a series of interviews to the producers, and understanding the effects of climate change and the variations of climate or weather they are perceiving in the last years. And thus the objective of the work is developing suggested
Well, maybe you are frozen. There is a difficulty with the connection. Eventually, you can close the camera to save the data.
Sì, appena fatto, grazie mille.
Okay. Okay, there is a problem of connection. My suggestion is now to start presenting the presentation of Julia today with the video, because Julia could not arrive. The presentation is about a study in the short food supply chain in Tenerife. Julia is doing the master thesis with the Institute of Natural Products and Agroecology of Canaria Island. And unfortunately, she today is traveling between Canaria Island and Spain, and so has some difficulties in connecting. But she sent us a video with the presentation, so I asked Giuseppe to share the video. And then we hope to have again Nicola. Please, Giuseppe, thanks.
So, good afternoon to everyone. Thanks for inviting me to this session and to organize such an interesting space to exchange some experiences about agroecology. So, if you're seeing this video, it means I have not been able to attend live to the event, so apologize for that. Today, I'm going to share with you my research on short food supply chains in Tenerife, which I developed during my internship in the Institute of Natural Products and of the Spanish National Research Council. I structured my presentation with a brief introduction and context of the research to contextualize about where we are talking about and a few concepts to frame my research. Then I will explain my research methodology, and because of the time, I will only expose 3 cases that I believe are representative to showcase my results and conclusions. Okay, to give people a background on where we are talking about, Canary Islands are an archipelago made up of 8 islands, which are located in the northeast of the Atlantic Ocean. The region is integrated in the Macaronesia region and is recognized as an autonomous community of Spain, as well as an ultra-peripheral region overseas of the European Union. In particular, Tenerife is the largest island of the archipelago and is the highest populated island in Spain and Macaronesia region. What makes Tenerife special? I would say it's subtropical climate with significant variability because of the trade winds and the volcanic origin. This physical composition generates one special region in which you can find 6 different climates, as you can see in the map, in which there are a big biodiversity with unique endemic species and multiple reserves and UNESCO World Heritage Sites. So it's not just beauty that's important, because these islands also hold considerable cultural and environmental significance. So the context of the research, we should take into account the colonial legacy of the Canary Islands, which has been characterized by an economical model based on agricultural exploitations. This is what we call colonial economy. So historically have relied to large monoculture plots tailored to the mainland's need, in this case, Spain, and started with the sugarcane, followed by mealybugs for dyeing, and then tomatoes and nowadays bananas. This history has shaped a unique socioeconomic structure where transnational dynamics overshadow local ones, and land ownership is uneven, with landlords controlling large and flat plots for export-oriented. And this prevalence of the exportation logics have bring the importation need. So it creates a dependency with the mainland for basic resources, and this situation has increased the prices because of the distance, and also obligated the government to subsidize the importing. So what is also interesting about the composition of Tenerife is the existence of an urban separation, urban-rural separation. And as you can see in the map, the agricultural plots are disseminated along the island and are integrated into the urban centers. And the space nowadays is becoming more and more limited due to the increasing of the population in the island. In fact, although I never seen growth like this, making research, I found that Spain is the main consumer of bactericides and fungicides of Europe, and the Canary Islands are the main consumer inside the region. So in parallel, Canary Islands also have the highest land prices of all of Spain. And now you can imagine all the consequences that are derived from this situation. But if you add the climate change situation, the island faces a difficult future. So given this context, I began to consider the need for an alternative to preserve traditional production methods. And as we have seen, Canary Islands, where importation is unsustainable, food sovereignty, I think it's crucial. So Before starting my fieldwork, I assumed the hypothesis that short food supply chains promote agroecological transition and food sovereignty. In particular, for me, it was interesting to analyze the role and collect a set of good practices of farmers markets to promote this change. And to achieve this goal, and once inside the field, I focus my specific goals to understand the complexity of the phenomenon and analyze the functions, services, and impacts of farmer markets, also define the different models, and identify the factors that promote or constrain the participation and governance. The research has the potential to provide valuable lessons and strategies for promoting sustainable agricultural models, and that could be repeated in similar contexts worldwide. So to frame my research, I adopted an agroecological perspective, which is an holistic, transdisciplinary, and pluriepistemological approach. I think this approach views reality as an interconnected whole and uses tools from various disciplines to build a new research paradigm. So merge traditional local knowledge with scientific knowledge. Then it was necessary to analyze farmers' markets as short food supply chains that was defined by the European Union as a space which involves few economic operators and are focused on cooperation and local economic development. And my research also focused on food sovereignty, which is defined as the right of people to define their own food systems. And this approach challenges the neoliberal market view and considers the influence of social agents and colonial history. And in this scenario, I think it's interesting to focus on the shift to a more sustainable and economical, viable, and socially just and culturally appropriate systems through an agroecological transition. So short food supply chains, I think, play a crucial role in the three dimensions of agroecology, forming these complementary elements that have to be harmonized to integrate and foster a comprehensive process of agroecological transition. In the research, I used a mixed method approach following the theoretical framework of agroecology. First, I contextualized the current situation of agroecological production, and I started searching some statistical data and represented through maps. And then one of the most important parts of the research has been the fieldwork, which I developed from February to June of this year. Firstly, I started my participant observation, attending to 20 of the 25 markets of the island. And in this first part, enabled me to understand the complexity of the farmers' markets and the approaches that agroecological productions have along the island. Also, during these visits, I had informal conversations with the vendors, and I established the rapport with the informants to develop further interviews with them. During the fieldwork, I observed 3 different models of management of the farmer markets, and I identified the reference markets in the island, which guide the other ones. So I decided to focus my research in these 3 main markets and then compare the models to 4 others more. The interviews are as part of the research, with 7 interviews to the managers and 7 interviews to the producers and sellers of the farmers markets. These interviews allowed me not only to understand the complexity of the different dimensions of the farmer markets, but also to compare the different perspectives of the actors involved. Here you can see the map of the distribution of the farmer markets that are mainly 1 per each region. And you can also see the municipal markets that are 3 in the whole island and are located in the urban areas. Okay, the first case study is the farmers market, wine and artisans of La Matanza de Centejo. This region is located in the north of the island and is characterized by a big transformation due to human activity of the environment. That had led to scarcity of natural vegetation and high percentage of abandoned lands. As you can see in the map, the municipality is renowned for its wine production, represented in purple areas, and high altitude potatoes that are in orange. Additionally, monoculture banana plantations dominate the coastal areas, and the plots have been integrated with urban configuration because it was family gardens for self-consumption in their origin. The farmer market in La Matanza was initiated in 1999 by the city council to revitalize the agricultural sector to fight against the population migration to urban centers. This market is managed by a municipal manager and is changing every 6 months due to the contract depends on a European subsidy. Producers lack decision-making participation, which led to internal conflicts. And currently there are only 24 vendors, including 2 ecological producers, and the market primarily serves elderly locals. The future prospects seem grim, as the council plans to transition it into an abastos market, which is the model that raises cost and shift away from its original community-focused management approach. Then the farmers market in Tegueste. Tegueste is a region inside the metropolitan area. It's noticeable that its historically rural composition have been converted in residential area for the inhabitants that work in the tertiary sector in Santa Cruz or La Laguna. The agricultural composition of this municipality are more disaggregated and reduced due to the important extension of the protected area of the rural park of Anaga. And however, it still exists a varied agricultural landscape with vineyards, potatoes, vegetables, and avocados, despite some areas being abandoned. This farmers market was established in 2004 following the request from local farmers, and now is managed jointly by the Farmers Association and the municipal managers. Currently, the market hosts 28 vendors, including 6 certified ecological producers, and its audience is local youth and tourists. The market features plans include expanding its vendor base, enhancing product diversity, and strengthening its community ties to sustain a growth and appeal. Then the Mercadillo of Tacoronte. Tacoronte is a rural municipality in the north region that thrives on agriculture as its primary economic activity. As you can see in the map, the territory is mainly dominated by agricultural fields without separation and with the urban spaces. And the main crops include avocados, citrus fruits, vegetables, potatoes, vineyards, and ornamental flowers, reflecting a rich agricultural heritage supported by numerous local associations. It was founded in 1991 as a response to unfair intermediary prices, and the Tacoronte farmers joined and has grown the second oldest market in the archipelago. Currently, the market boasts 41 active vendors weekly, including 3 ecological producers and occasionally vendors offering seasonal products. This space serves mainly local elderly and resident foreigners, and the market plan is to expand the training programs and integrate younger farmers to ensure its sustainability for the future. So visiting these various farmers markets revealed me distinct configurations and management styles. And despite all being classified as short food supply chains, facilitating direct marketing between producers and consumers, you can compare these markets and have several observations. Generally, the markets are predominantly composed of conventional farmers. Tegueste hosts the highest number of ecological vendors among the 3, although paradoxically, these producers do not actively promote agroecological practices. And in contrast, La Matanza and Tacoronte have fewer ecological vendors who integrate agroecological principles into their farming methods, but refrain from marketing their products due to perceived low consumer demand for sustainable products. So another noteworthy aspect is the treatment of traditional foods. La Matanza neglects their significance, whereas Tegueste and Tacoronte recognize and either monetize their cultural importance within the market. La Matanza also struggles with a high intermediary presence, impacting local producers' competitiveness, whereas Tegueste minimized intermediaries, largely comprising ecological vendors, which want to diversify their offerings to meet consumer needs. And on the other hand, Tacoronte operates with stringent regulations and doesn't have intermediaries that ensure these direct sales benefits for the farmers. And finally, these markets serve as more than sales venues, also functioning as community space for training and social interaction. Tacoronte leads in this regard with comprehensive training programs open to the local community, not only focusing on sustainable farming practices, but also to technological advancements. And Tegeste also offers selective producer-focused training, primarily aimed at maximizing benefits and marketing strategies. And La Matanza lacks such initiatives altogether. So in conclusion, the analysis reveals 3 distinct management models of farmer markets, reflecting varying degrees of producer participation and governance. In the case of La Matanza, it's an example of a top-down approach with minimal producer engagement, whereas Tacoronte embodies a bottom-up approach fostering community engagement and producer empowerment in decision-making. And also Tegeste represents an hybrid model where concealed management coexists with producer involvement in certain operational aspects and indicates a moderate governance level with limited autonomy for farmers in market governance. So farmer markets, for me, serving as short food supply chains play a crucial role in preserving traditional food production methods that are deeply rooted in local environments. And these global import-export dynamics that are all local cultures and governance, I think these markets uphold and celebrate local food traditions. So they bolster local economies by ensuring fair prices and directly benefiting farmers and consumers alike. So they mitigate also carbon footprints and food waste and promote biodiversity and seasonal eating, enhancing food quality and safety through sustainable practices. So the interaction between farmers and consumers at these markets also facilitates the adoption and scaling up of agroecological practices, encouraging innovation and influencing institutional policies towards sustainability. So in summary, maintaining these food systems not only benefits health and environment, but also strengthens community resilience and local economies. So in conclusions, my research highlights the diversity among farmers markets, emphasizing how their management can either empower small farmers and promote local food systems, or also can perpetuate global economic logics with intermediaries and large enterprise. So each market unique management determines whether it fosters horizontal participation and governance or reinforces scientific knowledge and dominance over traditional farmer wisdom. So I think farmers markets are well positioned to support agroecological approaches by accommodating diverse production systems and meeting consumer demands for healthy diets while they are preserving local culinary heritage. So they have the potential to advance to food sovereignty by localizing food systems, empowering small-scale farmers, promoting sustainable practices, and building community resilience. But can also serve as advocacy platforms for agroecology, fostering collaboration across sectors and advocating for supportive policies that prioritize sustainable farming practices and community empowerment. Thanks for listening. I hope we can see each other in the near future.
Perfect, thanks. I think this contribution of Julia completed the reflection today, focusing on the issue of assured food supply and the relation between the work of agroecology and the connection with people eating food and using agroecological products. I would like to use the last minutes of our session to involve again the speaker, Daniele Codato, Edoardo Crescini, Gabriele Saenz, and Elisabeth Masneri, asking you feedback about what you listen each other about these experiences, and especially the I try to focus the presentation today how the different experiences you share each other can facilitate the agroecological transition. We saw this imaging, the presentation of Eduardo of Highland of sustainability in the middle of palm oil plants. And we listen about the green alternative life. We understood that peasant farming give 3 times the work of industrial farm. Okay, this is an important element. Then Elizabeth, reflecting on the consideration and the work of Valle Rosset, how we are looking in the challenge of agroecology of a combined ancient and modern subaltern knowledge. Daniele Codato presented this experience in the cities of Padua, in which maybe it's not so important to produce food, but to stay together, to stay in the middle of nature, and to be sure about the quality of the food you are eating. And eventually, also the experience in the Andean of Gabriel Sainz, the importance of community work, despite clearly is important ecology, is important practice, but the community is a very important asset in any change. So I let the floor to you, who wants to start. Please raise your hand to make some consideration about how the experience we are seeing today, or in which you are involved, can facilitate agroecological transition. The floor is yours again, Elizabeth, Eduardo, Daniele, and Gabriel. Or eventually, if you have other questions among what you experienced in the work of other colleagues of today. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Massimo. And yes, I was very interested about the presentation concerning the main agroecological structure, because I think, well, mainly me as a geographer, I'm very interested in this kind of index, because it's one of the few indexes that measure agroecology, not only inside the farm, but also its connection, the connection of the farm with the surrounding landscape. So I think this is very interesting, and in this presentation, respect to the other article or papers that I read about main agroecological structure, is very interesting because is the first, that as far as I know, investigation that try to understand also with a statistical approach yes, what are the main factors that influence the agroecological development of these farms, and the capacity building of the farms, so and the construction of knowledge and capacity building. It seems that is very important, mainly in developing countries, and this was very interesting. And yes, this was very, for me, it was very interesting, this part of the investigation. And I think that also it could be applied, this kind of statistical analysis could applied also in our area, because we also in Padua and in the north of Italy, we try to understand and to measure the agroecological development of some of agroecological farms here in Italy. And so I would like to see if there are this kind of statistical relationship with the size and the capacity building and so on. So thank you.
Thank you, Daniele, for the comments. Actually, I wanted to make a link between part of my research and what Eduardo was telling us about the palm, the green deserts, right? So the first things that we realized is that, for example, actually the surrounding landscape, it is an important factor conditioning the agroecological transition, because it is a reservoir of genetics in terms of pollinators, in terms of useful species that might not be directly related to crops. However, what we saw, and it's also in coincidence with the many other studies that have been performed as far as we know in Colombia, mainly in the Cundinamarca region, which is high in altitude as well, is that cultural practices overcome the limitations that farmers might endure because of the lack of an agroecological structure, of an ecological structure surrounding the farms. It's interesting because farmers have not control of the surrounding forests and patches of vegetation, because that's not their land. They only control what's inside their land. But as far as they manage it wisely and properly, they can counter the effects of a really depredated and deforested land in around. However, it remains to be elucidated how long they will be able to sustain it without this structure supporting from the outside. And this leads us to these islands that we observe often, more often every time here in the Andes, where we don't have a connectivity with the landscape, and therefore the isolation of species that remain in these islands start to be detrimental for them, and the diversity and the ecological services and the dynamic functions that they might have got less over the time. And perhaps one of the most important things to connect with what Massimo said, how this supports agroecological transition, might be the easiness of observing things from a panoramic sense. So we had an experience of sharing these results with persons of one farm of Cayambe, which was not included in this study. And what we realized was not the contraction of forest patches, but rather the appearance of flower greenhouses surrounding the area. So it's really impactful because you can actually see how the agroindustry advances. And this reminds me a lot of an exercise that we did in classes back in Padova, where we measured like really generically how does the expansion of palm oil grows in the provinces where it's most widespread. So one of the most powerful approaches of digital imagery in general is to democratize the access of actually seeing how the territory is changing. Perhaps not directly, well, it is directly related to how, because my management will not be as fast forward as if I am bound every day by pesticides coming from the different activities that surrounds my farm. So how can I say that my production is agroecological if I have a daily basis of fumigations coming into my production, which might be, for example, the case of people who has farms, agroecological farms, near areas where we have a large monocultures such as palm oil, for example. So that was one of the most powerful insights we had in sharing this with the people, actually to democratize the access to technology and information to lobby towards higher political institutions to reduce or to control the widespread or the growth of these activities in land extensions. And it would be amazing to do this kind of comparative studies in other regions as well, which is actually one of the features of this project.
Thanks, Gabriel. Clear, any agroecological transition needs some rule defined by the regulation of the state or province or region, etc. I think this is a very important element for any agroecological transition. We have, before leaving the floor to Edoardo and Elizabeth, we have a couple of questions collected from the web. I let the floor to Francesco for the question.
Yeah, actually, this one is a question of mine for Elizabeth, because I found your work very, very interesting, especially for the fact that it connects the small-scale agricultural practices of the farmers with a very interesting theoretical framework. And I was wondering if the farmers with which you worked recognize themselves as part of a movement, and on the other side, if they are effectively as a part of some kind of movement or not in the territory, like to understand how those practices are being shared and territorialized, or if they are isolated phenomena, and how maybe they could be more shared more and get more diffused in the territories.
Yeah, thank you so much. So the two that I presented, one, the Tierra Yai are neo-rural people, so coming from Medellin and then planting. So they are not like, they call themselves sembradoras, but not campesinas. So I don't know even if refer as farmers, but yeah, they are not linked to a movement. But the other one that are campesinos, they had like a movement and a cooperative that like joined six families of agroecological in agroecological transition in Carmen del Viboral. And they actually have like hojarasca. There is a place in which they all community, there is like a community space where they can sell their products. What happened is that they began as a cooperative, and then a member bought all of it. And so now there is not a movement, like I'm a sociologist, so I would not say that now they are a movement, but they are in connection with other movements like the ACA of Antioquia. It's like the Asociación Campesina Antioquia. And they are a big, strong movement in Antioquia, but not all of them, of course, are doing agroforestry or agroecology. But they are implementing many transitions and giving also support to the farmers in Antioquia. So this is all of it. And then the cases that I didn't present, that are other 6 cases. There is an association in the Santuario, that is the one in which Tierra Yai is located, where there is a movement of women that are selling collectively there, and it's about 15 women, and just 3 of them are in transition agroecological. So I think this is how they are supported, how is the movement structured. It's not so much structured, it's something that I saw. And many people, they had 2 struggles. One, that it's connected to what Gabriel Sainz said. So they just have control on the outside, and like they can't control what is going on outside. And this it's so much problem when it comes to agrotoxics, because that is really it's really impactful. And the other problem is that many of the people that I interview, they say that they are alone in doing this, and they feel alone. So I think that even if they have movements, there is not, I don't know, there is not this kind of structure in all the movements. The only one that has a really good structure and people feel the connection, feel that they are not alone in this transition, it's ACA. But the other ones, it was really sad also to interview people that shared that kind of loneliness, to me. And I don't know, if I can continue, I will do like my little comment. I was really interested in the presentation of Eduardo in the plantation scene. I'm really fan of Donna Haraway and Singh. And the question here that also in Colombia I saw a lot is how we can resist in a world that is based on plantation, like where agroecology is being actively co-opted even in this, like because I came across also bad agroforestries or co-opted agroecologies in which the pursuit of capitalism, like, I don't know, we plant some trees and we call it agroforestry or agroecology, but we continue with the same paradigm. And about what said Gabriel Sainz of that people don't have control on the outside, the counter effect of this is, of course, I saw it also by myself, diversity. I saw in agroforestry in Colombia that farmers are really putting a lot of effort in diversity because this is the only way in which they can really control what is in the inside and kind of don't affect it so much what is going on the outside. And how can we facilitate a agroecological transition, what Professor De Marchi said. I think that this can help, of course, like sharing and inspiring can demonstrate the kind of symbiotic relationship between agriculture and biodiversity conservation. And also that there are agroecologies that are diverse and occupy different positions within social hierarchies. So also coming in together and pose critical question about movements, about what is going on, it's guiding the audience towards like critical question already something that facilitate, I think, these kind of transitions.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I let the floor now to Carlo, who has one question.
Yes, thank you for your interesting presentations. I have two quick questions for Gabriel. Like I wanted to understand how was the MAS as a tool of reflections with farmers? Like, did they share any thoughts during the interviews apart from the statistical analysis? And the other question is, did you try to investigate also the relationships between MAS and the age of the agroecological farm, and also with the gender dimension? Yeah, these two questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Carlo. I would like to briefly share my screen again, if I may, just to stress the point that was asked. There you go. So in the sense of the statistical analysis and the way we were able to share it, as far as now, one of the most powerful aspects, as I said before, whenever we were able to share the results somehow with the farmers, was the possibility to see in perspective, right, the farm in itself. The statistical analysis were a novelty in terms of trying to make a mathematical sense out of these geographical and somehow measurable results. But it's important to say that there is a strong qualitative component of this research, meaning that it is largely, even though the whole indicators are strictly delimited, so the researcher might be able to get the most objective answer possible. it's still subjected to some bias. So my intention by doing a statistical analysis towards it was to find some patterns, and the strongest pattern that we found was how the geographic position was a really strong factor in terms of predicting somehow the MAS. We discussed this. I discussed this in the paper that will be published hopefully soon enough. That the two locations that got the highest results were the ones also closest to the capital city, to Quito. So it might be that it's not the geographical location that explains the mass, but rather the proximity to the capital city, because we cannot leave behind the fact that Ecuador is a highly centralized country still, even though it has local, not centralized governments, the GATs, as we call them here. Still, the capital city exerts a lot of influence in terms of mobility, for example, how easy it is to access the rural parts, how easy it is to find researchers that might get or gather the logistics to travel to some places to perform this act of interchanging information and knowledge with farmers. So I discussed that it might be not because of the geographical location in itself, but rather how close they are to the capital. So it could be that the closest rural area is to the capital. The most probable it would be that the aid cooperation, right, arrives to that part, leaving other parts such as the southern and then region, which would be really interesting to check, perhaps at the margin or with really low levels of agroecological development, right? Another thing that was really important to see is that even though all the farmers had called themselves agroecological producers, it was undeniable that they were on different levels of agroecological production. And by levels, I mean degrees of development of agroecological practices, meaning that, for example, the time was really key in terms of identifying how long were they actually working with these practices, and others that rather were turning into agroecological practices in recent times. So that exerted a strong factor as well, but I wasn't able to quantify it or to relate it in terms of a statistical analysis, and for that, I left it behind. But still, numbers have a lot of power in terms of information that was left at the margins of this research, but might be completely useful for strengthening, right, the future researches. And I would like to stress the fact that statistical analyses are indeed powerful, but are not like a law, right? They are useful for interpreting some patterns. However, we were really careful with sharing these kind of answers with the farmers, because you can actually discourage a lot someone that is really trying hard to get into agroecological production by saying you have a really low index. So my experience was that, like, trying to encourage people by saying this is a way of measuring it, and your effort is not translated directly into these indexes, but rather it shows us that we need to work further on this thing or on the other. Yeah, so I hope.
Thanks, Gabriel. We should close because we are already at 6 o'clock. Just if Eduardo has something to comment for conclusion. Many thanks, Gabriel. It was clear your reflection on the use of statistics. I don't know if you, Eduardo, have something to say, and then I suggest to close the session because we are outside 6 o'clock.
Yes, Maximo, I will be very brief. I think this session it will be very interesting because from the speech of Gabriel and Elizabeth, it's like practical and of practical practices of agroecological transition. That is the way that we have to follow if we want to go beyond this current climate crisis and change the food sovereignty. And I think also it's very important disseminate this kind of practices and example, because it's difficult for example, a smallholder throw back in a agroecological system if it's now in a conventional agriculture, because you have to have a lot of knowledge more than the use of only agrotoxins or agrochemicals. And I think it's very interesting how from the bottom, the people and societies movement try to figure out new form of reclaim their heritage, but also their practices of restore and manage the land. Instead, the capital or companies, the big lobbies, only reconfigure the same practices of exploitation, that in the sense that in the early it's only exploitation. Now there is this certification, so try to change the narrative in a sustainable way. As we can see, it's only the same things with a green label. So I think it's very interesting how from bottom we have like try to figure out new ways, and from the top it's like the same things reconfiguring some instruments and try to change the narrative.
Okay, thanks. Thanks to everybody for your contribution and for real and direct reflection between what is produced in a scientific domain and what is done in the field, in this need to bring to recuperate the subaltern reflection. From other side, thanks for the public participating at this conference and the possibility to follow this conference in 3 languages. Thanks to all. All the video will be available. Then at the end of this year, the proceeding of this conference will be available in open access in order to facilitate the circulation. Many thanks to all, and have a good afternoon or good day, depending where you are. Ciao, and see you. Ciao.